Odenigbo learned the sound of hunger before he learned how to read. It was the first thing that greeted him each morning, even before the rooster's cry pierced the gray air of the village. Hunger woke him up more faithfully than sunlight. It curled inside his stomach like a restless animal, gnawing, scratching, refusing to be ignored. Sometimes it made strange noises, loud enough that he feared others might hear it and laugh. Other times it sat quietly, heavy and painful, like a stone pressed deep inside him. It was the hollow echo in his stomach at night, the way sleep refused to come because his body ached for food. It was the smell of Gary soaked in cold water that never belonged to him, even when he poured it. It was the way his aunt's voice sharpened whenever his name left her mouth. Odenigbo, are you deaf? Come here. Her voice always arrived before her footsteps, sharp, impatient, cutting through the early morning like a blade. The village of Amuka was still waking up when she shouted. Women were just stepping out with brooms made of palm fronds, sweeping red dust into small, tired piles. Smoke rose lazily from kitchen sheds as firewood crackled, and the smell of boiling yam drifted through the air. Children laughed somewhere down the road, chasing one another with bare feet and careless joy. But for Odenigbo, joy was a distant sound, something that belonged to other people's lives. He scrambled out of the small room he shared with 3 of his cousins. The mat they slept on was thin and worn, offering little comfort from the hard-packed earth floor. He rubbed the sleep from his eyes, his small frame already tensed, ready for the day's first command. His aunt, Mama Adana, stood by the cooking fire, her face a mask of irritation. She was a large woman, her body softened by years of childbirth and good food, a stark contrast to Odenigbo's own stick-thin limbs. She pointed a thick finger towards a bucket of water. The water pot is almost empty. Go to the stream before the sun gets too hot. And don't take all day, you hear me? I need that water to make the morning fufu. He nodded, not daring to speak. Words often got him into trouble. It was safer to be a shadow, a pair of hands, a set of feet that moved quickly. He picked up the smaller bucket, the one his arms could manage, and set off. The path to the stream was familiar. His bare feet knew every stone, every treacherous route that snaked across the ground. Other children were on the same path, their laughter echoing through the trees. They ran in groups, splashing each other, their buckets clanging. They called out to him, but their words were not friendly. Look, it's Odenigbo the orphan, one boy shouted. Did your stomach cry all night? Another one jeered. He kept his head down, his pace steady. He had learned long ago that reacting only fueled their taunts. Their words were like stones, and he had learned to build a wall around himself, a wall made of silence. He focused on the task, on the feel of the cool morning air on his skin, on the rhythm of his own breathing. At the stream, he waited his turn. The girls chattered as they filled their pots, their colorful wrappers a vibrant splash against the green of the forest. They spoke of the upcoming New Yam festival, of new clothes and dancing. Odenigbo listened, an invisible observer. He could never imagine himself at the festival, wearing new clothes. His only shirt was frayed at the collar, and his shorts had a patch on the knee that his aunt had sewn with angry, uneven stitches. When his turn came, he filled his bucket quickly. He dipped his hands in, splashing his face, washing away the dust and the lingering stickiness of sleep. For a brief moment, he was just a boy at a stream, not an orphan, not a burden, just a boy in the cool water. The walk back was harder. The bucket, now full, was heavy. It sloshed against his legs, soaking his shorts. His thin arms strained, and he had to stop several times, setting the bucket down to rest. Each time he stopped, the hunger in his stomach twisted, reminding him of its presence. He knew there would be no breakfast for him until all the chores were done, and even then, it would be a small portion, just enough to quiet the beast inside him, but never enough to slay it. He imagined the food that others were eating. The soft, warm yam with rich palm oil stew. The akara balls, golden and crispy, sold by the woman at the market junction. His mouth watered, a painful, useless reaction. Hunger was a master of torture, dangling promises it never intended to keep. Back at the compound, Mama Adana took the bucket from him without a word of thanks. She was already pounding yam in a large wooden mortar, her movements strong and rhythmic. The thud of the pestle was another sound of the morning, a sound that promised food for everyone but him. Go and sweep the compound, she ordered, not even looking at him. And after that, Feed the chickens. Don't just stand there staring like a fool. He picked up the palm frond broom. The red dust rose in small clouds as he swept, coating his feet and legs. He moved with an efficiency born of routine. Sweep the compound. Feed the chickens. Fetch more firewood. The list of chores was endless, a chain that kept him moving from sunrise to sunset. The other children in the compound, his cousins, were now awake. They sat near the fire, eating roasted corn, their faces bright with a well-fed glow. They ignored him completely, as if he were part of the scenery, no more significant than the goats tied to a nearby tree. He was family, but not family. He lived in the house, but he did not belong. He was a ghost at their feast. This was the rhythm of his life. His world was small, confined by the boundaries of the compound and the path to the stream. His future was a blur, a question mark he was too afraid to ask. As he scattered corn for the chickens, watching them peck eagerly at the ground, he felt a pang of something akin to envy. Even these birds ate without worry. They did not know the gnawing emptiness, the constant, dull ache of a stomach that was never truly full. Later that morning, after all the chores were done, his aunt finally called him. "Odenigbo, come and eat." He approached the cooking shed, his heart a mixture of hope and resignation. She handed him a small bowl. Inside was a lump of fufu, smaller than his fist, with a thin, watery soup that had only a hint of fish. It was the leftover portion, the scrapings from the bottom of the pot. He took the bowl and went to sit by himself, behind the kitchen shed, hidden from view. He ate slowly, making each mouthful last. He closed his eyes, trying to pretend it was more than it was. He tried to imagine the taste of the rich stew his cousins had eaten, but the watery soup on his tongue brought him back to reality. He finished in a few bites. The food sat in his stomach, a small, temporary truce in his ongoing war with hunger. It was not enough, it was never enough, but it was something. It was enough to keep him going, to give him the strength to face the rest of the day. As he washed the small bowl, he heard his aunt talking to a neighbor who had come to visit. "That boy," Mama Adana said, her voice heavy with martyrdom. "He eats more than my own 3 children combined. An extra mouth to feed is no small thing, I tell you." Odenigbo froze, the bowl still in his hands. He pressed his lips together, swallowing the lump that had formed in his throat. He was not just hungry. He was an inconvenience, a burden. His hunger was not just his own private pain. It was a problem for others. He finished washing the bowl and placed it back where it belonged. He slipped away, back into the shadows of the compound, his presence as quiet and unnoticed as a sigh. The sun was high in the sky now, hot and unforgiving. He looked up at it, his eyes squinting. The day was still young, and the sound of hunger, though muffled for now, was already tuning its strings, preparing for its evening performance. Odenigbo knew, with a certainty that went bone deep, that it would be a long, long time before he learned any other sound as well as he knew this one. Odenigbo wondered, not for the first time, what it felt like to belong. The question often crept into his mind quietly, like a thief afraid of being noticed. Belonging seemed like a simple thing, something other children carried without effort, like their names or the sound of their laughter. Yet to Odenigbo, it felt distant, almost imaginary, like stories told to children to help them sleep. He remembered belonging once. He remembered evenings when his mother called him inside before darkness settled fully, her voice gentle but firm. He remembered sitting close to his father during moonlit stories, feeling protected just by proximity. Back then, belonging had been as natural as breathing. Now, it felt like a luxury he could no longer afford. On his way through the village, he watched families moving together. Mothers held children's hands. Fathers carried loads with quiet pride. Even scolding felt different when it came from love. He noticed how children complained openly, confident that forgiveness would follow. That confidence amazed him. By the time he returned to the compound, the sun was already climbing high, casting sharp shadows on the ground. Heat pressed down on him like an extra weight. His stomach growled openly now, no longer polite enough to whisper. Aunty Felicia was seated on a wooden stool, sorting vegetables. She did not look up as he approached. "You are late again," she said, even though he knew he wasn't. "I'm sorry," he replied automatically. She ignored him. He stood there for a while, uncertain, until she pointed sharply. "Did I tell you to stand there like a goat? Wash the plates." So he knelt again, scrubbing plates that reminded him of food he had not eaten. The sun beat down on his back. Sweat ran into his eyes, stinging. His hands moved without thought. Hunger made everything mechanical. When he finished and stood aside, time seemed to stretch painfully. The compound was quiet. Too quiet. Quiet meant she might notice him. And she did. "Why are you just standing there?" she snapped. "Do you think I brought you here to rest?" "No, Aunty." "Then go and sweep the backyard." He picked up the broom and swept until dust coated his legs and arms. With every movement, his body protested more loudly. His head felt light, and the edges of his vision blurred. Still, he swept, because stopping meant questions, and questions led to anger. By afternoon, his strength was nearly gone. He leaned briefly against the wall, just to steady himself. That was when hunger hit him hardest, sudden, sharp, unforgiving. His knees buckled slightly, and for a moment he thought he might fall. He swallowed hard, breathing through it the way he had learned. Endure. That night, darkness arrived gently, as if unaware of the suffering it covered. The moon hung low and yellow, watching silently. The village came alive with sounds of evening. Laughter, radios, cooking pots clanging, plates being shared. Odenigbo lay on his mat, staring up at the cracked ceiling, listening. Laughter floated in from nearby houses. Plates clinked. Someone tuned a radio until music filled the air. His stomach ached so badly it felt like something inside him was tearing. Tears slid quietly down his cheeks, soaking into the mat, leaving no trace by morning. He did not sob. He had learned not to. Loud crying attracted attention. Attention brought trouble. So he cried silently, the way hungry children learn to cry. And in the silence, the sound of hunger sang him to sleep. Odenigbo's parents died when he was 7. The sentence lived inside him like a fact carved into stone. It did not change, no matter how much time passed. It did not soften. It simply existed. Before death entered his life, Odenigbo knew what laughter sounded like inside a home. He knew the comfort of routine, the safety of familiarity. He knew what it meant to wake up without fear. His mother's hands were always busy, sorting vegetables, washing clothes, cooking meals, but they were gentle when they touched him. Her palms were rough from years of farm work, yet when she brushed his hair or wiped his face, the touch carried warmth that made him feel seen. His father's voice filled spaces. It was deep and calm, a voice that did not need to shout to command respect. When his father spoke, people listened, not because they were afraid, but because they trusted him. They lived in a small mud house at the edge of the village. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. The walls were strong, the roof patched, but dependable. At night, crickets sang outside, and the sound felt comforting rather than lonely. His father, Okari, was a builder. Each morning, he tied his worn boots carefully, checking the soles as if they might fail him one day. He slung his tools over his shoulder and always paused before leaving. "Listen to your mother," he told Odenigbo daily. "And be a good man," Odenigbo replied, repeating the words he had been taught. His mother, Nkiru, sold vegetables in the market. She woke early, humming softly as she cooked. Her songs were old, handed down like inheritance, filled with hope and warnings and love. Sometimes Odenigbo joined in, off-key but enthusiastic, and she laughed. Life was not rich, but it was full. On market days, Odenigbo followed his mother closely, holding the edge of her wrapper so he wouldn't get lost in the crowd. The market was a world of color and sound. Women calling out prices, goats bleating, metal clanging, palm oil glowing like liquid gold in calabashes. His mother always bought him akara wrapped in old newspaper. She blew on it before handing it to him, even when it was barely hot. "Eat slowly," she said. "Food tastes better when you respect it." He believed her. At night, his father told stories by moonlight. They sat outside, the air cool, the stars bright. His father spoke of tortoises who thought they were clever and learned hard lessons, of spirits who rewarded kindness and punished wickedness. Odenigbo believed those stories deeply. He believed the world made sense. That good was rewarded. That love lasted. Until the day it didn't. Death did not arrive loudly. It came disguised as an ordinary day. The sky was bright that morning, too bright for bad news. His father left as usual, tools over his shoulder, waving until he disappeared down the dusty road. His mother hummed as she washed vegetables, the rhythm steady and comforting. By afternoon, the humming stopped. Men arrived at the compound first, men with dust on their clothes and fear in their eyes. Men who avoided looking directly at Odenigbo's mother. Her basket slipped from her hands when she saw them. Tomatoes scattered across the ground, bursting open like small wounds. "What happened?" she asked. No one answered immediately. When they finally spoke, the words came slowly, carefully, as if each syllable might shatter something. The building had collapsed. The beams were weak. It happened suddenly. His father was gone. Odenigbo did not cry. He watched his mother fall to the ground, her scream tearing through the air, frightening birds from the trees. He stood frozen, waiting for someone to correct the mistake. No one did. That was the day the world broke open. Odenigbo's father burial came too quickly. His father's body was wrapped and lowered into the earth, while drums beat slow and heavy. Women wailed. Men murmured prayers. Odenigbo stood beside his mother, holding her hand as she trembled uncontrollably. That night, oil lamps flickered, casting restless shadows on the walls. People filled the compound, speaking in hushed tones. Odenigbo sat in a corner, watching strangers cry for a man he loved too deeply to understand how to express it. He waited for his mother to hold him. She did not. After the burial, the house changed. The change was not loud. It crept in quietly, settling into corners and crevices, replacing warmth with emptiness. Laughter left first, then singing, then conversation. His mother stopped humming while she cooked. Sometimes, she forgot to cook at all. She sat for hours, staring at the doorway, eyes unfocused, as if expecting his father to walk in late and apologize for keeping them waiting. When she spoke, it was often to someone who wasn't there. "You said you would come back," she whispered. "You promised." Odenigbo tried to help. He swept, fetched water, ran errands without being asked. He watched her closely, afraid she might disappear if he looked away too long. But grief had already taken hold of her, sinking its teeth in deep. Neighbors came with food, with advice, with words meant to heal. "You are still young," they told her. "You still have your son. You must be strong." Strength did not come. Food lost its taste. Days lost their shape. Time stretched and folded in on itself. Some mornings, his mother did not get out of bed. Other mornings, she woke crying. At night, Odenigbo lay awake listening to her sob quietly, afraid to approach, afraid to make it worse. Sometimes she spoke his father's name over and over, like a prayer that had lost its power. 3 months after his father's death, his mother followed him. Not from sickness, not from an accident, from grief that hollowed her out until there was nothing left to hold her up. That morning, the compound was too quiet. No sound of firewood, no movement, no soft call of his name. "Mama," Odenigbo whispered. She did not answer. Panic rose like fire. He shook her gently, then harder. Her skin felt wrong, too still, too cold. He ran outside screaming for help, his voice cracking with terror. Neighbors came quickly. They tried to revive her. They shook their heads. She cried herself into the grave, someone said softly. Odenigbo stood beside her body, numb. He waited for her chest to rise. He waited for her eyes to open. They never did. That was the moment childhood truly ended. When both of the people who made the world safe were gone. When the word alone became real. That was how Odenigbo became an orphan. The word did not mean much to him at first. It sounded like a label adults used in low voices, a thing whispered rather than explained. He only understood its weight through what followed, through the way people looked at him differently, through the careful distance they kept, through the sudden urgency with which his future became a problem to be solved. News traveled fast in Amuaka. By evening, the elders gathered beneath the big mango tree, its wide branches casting shadows like listening ears. Mats were spread. Low stools were arranged. Names were mentioned, dismissed, reconsidered. Responsibility moved from one mouth to another like something bitter no one wanted to swallow. Odenigbo sat nearby, silent, his knees pulled to his chest. He watched the men talk over him as if he were not there, as if he were an object that needed relocation. He did not interrupt. Children were not meant to speak in such gatherings. "Who will take him?" one elder asked finally. Silence followed. Someone cleared his throat. Another shifted uncomfortably. Then a name surfaced. Mama Adana, his father's elder sister. When she arrived, she came loudly. Her wailing rose high, her grief dramatic and public. She beat her chest and cried out her brother's name, drawing eyes and sympathy. People murmured approval. They nodded. They praised her heart. "Ah, sister of the deceased," they said. "May God strengthen you." She wiped her eyes and promised to take the boy in. For the sake of my brother, she declared. Blood is blood. Those words wrapped themselves around Odenigbo's heart like rope. He clung to them desperately. Blood meant family. Family meant safety. Or so he believed. He did not yet know how heavy blood could become when love was absent. The day he left his parents' house, Odenigbo stood in the doorway for a long time. The walls seemed to watch him, silent witnesses to his leaving. The air smelled of dust and old memories. He touched the spot where his mother used to sit, where his father rested his tools. He wanted to say goodbye properly, but words failed him, so he followed his aunt. With that single step away from home, childhood slipped quietly from his hands. The journey felt short, but honestly, it seemed to stretch on forever. Odenigbo trailed behind Mama Adana, clutching a small bundle of clothes wrapped in his mother's old, faded wrapper. Each step felt heavier than the last, like he was dragging a mountain behind him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was either walking towards safety or heading straight into something worse. The road was familiar, but everything looked different. The trees loomed taller, their branches casting long shadows that felt almost menacing. The paths seemed narrower, as if they were closing in on him. Above, the sky stretched wide and empty, like it had nothing left to offer him. Mama Adana didn't glance back, and that stung a bit. Her compound was bigger than his parents' place. 2 rooms instead of 1, a shiny zinc roof that sparkled in the sun like it was showing off. The gate creaked open, almost as if it was protesting his arrival. Chickens scattered everywhere, flapping and clucking angrily, making the whole scene feel even more chaotic. "This is your new home," she said flatly, and it felt like a weight dropped in his stomach. Odenigbo nodded, gripping his bundle tighter, trying to convince himself that maybe, just maybe, this would be a fresh start. At first, she smiled, but it was a smile that faded as quickly as it appeared. Only when people were around did she put on that act. She told the neighbors how painful it was to lose a brother and how tough it was to suddenly care for a child that wasn't hers. They praised her kindness, calling her a good woman, and the elders blessed her like she was some kind of saint. Odenigbo watched from behind her wrapper, hope flickering inside him like a candle in the wind. Maybe things would be different here, but they weren't. Once the doors closed, the smiles vanished. That first night, she pointed to a corner of the room where her son slept. "You can sleep there," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Don't disturb them." The mat was thin and smelled musty, like it hadn't been aired out in ages. He lay down carefully, folding himself into a small ball, trying to find some comfort in the darkness. In the silence, he whispered his mother's name, hoping for some kind of warmth, but it didn't come. The next morning, before the rooster even thought about crowing, she shook him awake. "Wake up," she snapped, her voice sharp. "Do you think food cooks itself?" From that day forward, routine replaced any hint of mercy. Odenigbo became the first one up and the last one to sleep. He swept the floors until his arms burned, fetched water until his neck ached, and washed dishes until his fingers cracked and bled. While his cousins laughed and played, he toiled away, and while they rested, he was off running errands. "You must earn your stay," Mama Adana reminded him often, like it was some kind of mantra. The house had rules he never learned, rules that seemed to change on a whim. If he spoke too much, he was rude. If he stayed quiet, he was lazy. If something broke, it was his fault. If food ran out too soon, he was greedy. There was always a reason, and somehow, he always ended up paying for it. Slowly, painfully, Odenigbo began to understand the harsh reality. This house was just shelter, not a home. It provided food, but not care. It was about survival, not love. And in that realization, his heart sank deeper. He longed for the warmth of a real family, the laughter that echoed with joy instead of fear. But here, in this place, it felt like he was just a shadow, always in the background, never truly seen. The first night, Odenigbo found himself sleeping on the floor, and let me tell you, it wasn't exactly a cozy setup. The floor was cold, uneven, and had this lingering smell, kind of like dust mixed with old sweat and something sour that he just couldn't put his finger on. It wasn't welcoming at all, you know? Mama Adana, his aunt, pointed to a corner of the room where her son slept, barely glancing at him as she spoke. "You can lie there," she said, her tone flat. "Don't disturb them." And that was it. No goodnight wishes, no comforting words, and certainly no explanations. Just a mat, thin and flimsy, like it was made more for decoration than for comfort. When he unrolled it, the edges curled up stubbornly, almost like it was rejecting him, too. He lay down carefully, trying to be as quiet as possible, almost afraid to breathe too loudly. His cousins were already asleep, sprawled across their beds, limbs relaxed and breaths deep, completely unbothered. Their stomachs were full, and they had their tomorrows all planned out. Odenigbo listened to the rhythm of their breathing, and it twisted something painfully inside his chest. Turning his face toward the wall, he whispered his mother's name, but it came out broken, like a fragile glass shattering. The darkness didn't answer, and that night, sleep was a stranger. Each time he closed his eyes, memories flooded back. His mother humming while cooking, his father's stories that always felt like magic, the warmth of lying between them on cold nights. The contrast between those memories and his current reality hurt more than hunger ever could. When sleep finally claimed him, it was shallow and restless, like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. Before the rooster crowed, a rough hand shook him awake. "Wake up," Mama Adana snapped, her voice cutting through the fog of his dreams. "Do you think food cooks itself? Get up." His body protested as he stood, every muscle stiff from the cold floor and the thin mat. Rubbing his eyes quickly, he followed her outside without a word. That morning marked a turning point, the end of childhood routines and the beginning of a harsh survival mode. From that day on, he became the first to wake and the last to sleep. The mornings were brutal. He swept the compound before dawn, his small hands gripping the broom until blisters formed, each stroke a reminder of his new reality. Fetching water was another challenge. He stumbled along paths barely visible in the dark, the cool air biting at his skin. Washing plates crusted with food he was never allowed to eat became a ritual, scrubbing until his fingers cracked and bled, the pain a constant companion. While his cousins slept, he worked. While they played, he worked. While they rested, he worked. "You must earn your stay," Mama Adana would say, her voice as cold as the morning air. "Nothing is free in this life." Each time she said it, he nodded, swallowing words he didn't know how to say. The house had rules he was never taught, rules that shifted like shadows, always elusive. Speak too much, and he was rude. Stay quiet, and he was useless. Ask questions, and he was stubborn. Make mistakes, and he was wicked. It was a confusing maze, and he felt like he was constantly stumbling through it. If something broke, it was his fault. If food finished early, he was greedy. If the day went badly, he was the reason. Punishment came without warning. Sometimes it was a slap, quick, sharp, humiliating. Other times, it was hunger, intentional, prolonged, gnawing at his insides. And sometimes, it was words, slow, poisonous, meant to linger like a bad taste in his mouth. "You are just like your useless parents. See how thin you are? You eat like a goat. If not for me, you would be begging on the road." Each sentence lodged itself inside him, becoming part of how he saw himself. It was like building a wall of shame, brick by brick, until he felt completely trapped. At night, he lay on his mat, staring at the ceiling, listening to his cousins laugh softly, sharing jokes he was never invited to be a part of. He learned how to cry without sound, how to let tears soak into the mat silently. He learned how to disappear inside himself, to fade into the background where no one could see him. Weeks passed, then months. His body changed, his shoulders became sharper, his clothes hung loosely on him, and his eyes grew older, darker, heavier. Hunger became a constant companion, not just in his stomach, but in his bones, his thoughts, his dreams. It was like a shadow that followed him everywhere, a reminder of everything he lacked. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, he wondered if his parents were watching, if they could see what their son had become. That thought hurt more than any punishment ever could, gnawing at him like an insatiable hunger. The weight of it pressed down on him, and he felt like he was drowning in a sea of despair, desperately searching for a lifeline that never came. Every day was a battle, and he was just trying to survive in a world that felt so unforgiving. But even in the darkest moments, a flicker of hope remained. Maybe, just maybe, he would find a way to break free from the chains of his circumstances. Village life continued around him, indifferent to his suffering. Life did not pause because a child was breaking quietly inside a compound. The sun still rose. The market still buzzed. Women still gathered to pound fufu, their pestles rising and falling in steady rhythm. laughter weaving through the air like music. Children chased one another under the moon, barefoot and fearless, their joy loud and unashamed. Radios played high-life songs in the evenings. Men argued politics and football. Life went on. Odenigbo watched it all from the shadows. Sometimes, neighbors called him over. Odenigbo, come and help me carry this. Boy, run this message for me. He went eagerly, not because the work was light, but because those moments offered something rare, acknowledgement. Occasionally, kindness followed. A woman slipped him a piece of leftover yam. An old man pressed a coin into his palm. Another allowed him to drink water from her clay pot. Those moments felt like mercy, but Mama Adana noticed. Why are you roaming around? She asked one evening, suspicion sharp in her eyes. People will put nonsense into your head. He did not know what nonsense meant, but he knew it was dangerous. At night, she reminded him of his place. You are lucky I took you in, Mama Adana said once, counting money from the market. Do you think people line up to take another man's child? He nodded, though something inside him wanted to scream. If not for me, she continued, you would be sleeping on the road. Remember that. He remembered. Every day, there were days she allowed him to go to school. Those days were not gifts. They were tests. He wore uniforms patched so many times they barely held together. His sandals were torn, laughing at him with every step. Other children noticed. Orphan, son of nobody. Their words followed him into the classroom. He sat at the back, stomach empty, head heavy, eyes burning from lack of sleep. The teacher once paused mid-lesson and looked at him. Why do you always look tired? She asked. Odenigbo opened his mouth, then closed it. How do you explain hunger to someone who has never counted mouthfuls? How do you explain fear as routine? How do you explain a life where pain is normal? So he said nothing. Some afternoons, he returned from school to find chores doubled as punishment for leaving the house. Other days, he was not allowed to eat because school made him proud. Pride, he learned, was another crime. One evening, Mama Adana accused him of stealing meat from the soup. He had not eaten all day. He had not touched the pot. Truth did not matter. She dragged him into the compound, under heavy rain. Thief, you want to kill me in this house. He fell. He begged. He promised things he did not understand. That night, he lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling and asking God a question only abandoned children know how to ask. Why did you leave me here? Outside, rain began to fall. It soaked the ground. It washed the dust. It cooled the air, but the rain never pitted him. The change crept in like a thief in the night, silent and insidious. It didn't announce itself with loud declarations or sharp stings. There wasn't a single moment when Odenigbo could say, "This is when it all fell apart." Instead, cruelty learned to whisper, sneaking into the corners of his life without making a sound. Mama Adana, once a figure of authority and, dare I say, warmth, stopped noticing him altogether. At first, Odenigbo thought it was a strange kind of mercy. Days went by without a slap, and weeks passed without the sting of the cane. He could feel his body healing slowly, the scars fading into darker lines against his skin. For a fleeting moment, hope, foolish and fragile, crept back into his chest, almost like a shy bird peeking out from its nest. But then, reality hit him like a cold wave. He hadn't been forgiven. He had been erased from their lives. Meals began without his name being called, like he was some ghost haunting the kitchen. Plates were set on the table, 4 of them, as if he never existed. His cousins gathered around, laughing and joking as Mama Adana served them with care, asking if they wanted more soup, more meat, more swallow. Their laughter filled the room, a stark contrast to the emptiness he felt. Odenigbo stood in the doorway, a silent observer, waiting for a glance, a word, anything. But no one looked up. When they finished eating, Mama Adana gathered the plates and carried them away without a single word directed at him. Whatever remained, scraps clinging to the edges of pots, was poured out for the chickens, a cruel reminder of his place in this household. That night, hunger howled inside him like a trapped animal, gnawing at his insides. It was a feeling he knew too well, but this time it was different. The next morning was the same, and the one after that. When he finally mustered the courage to ask, "Mama, may I eat?" her response was one of mild surprise, as if she had forgotten he existed entirely. "Eat?" she repeated, her tone almost incredulous. "Are you not strong enough to find food?" Those words landed softly, but they cut deeper than any slap ever could. In that moment, Odenigbo understood a new kind of suffering, one that didn't involve physical pain but a deep, gnawing loneliness. He learned to survive on what he could scavenge unnoticed: cold Gary mixed with water behind the house, burnt yam peels discarded by neighbors. Sometimes he found nothing at all. His body shrank further, bones pushing against skin, his clothes hanging off him like they belonged to someone else. It was as if he was fading away, piece by piece. Mama Adana no longer insulted him. She no longer punished him. She simply let him disappear, like a shadow at dusk. His cousins were warned not to speak to him. "Leave that boy," Mama Adana would say, her voice firm. "Too much suffering follows him." And they obeyed, sealing him off from any flicker of connection. Silence wrapped around Odenigbo like a second skin. Even his footsteps seemed too loud in the stillness of the house. He learned how to move through the space without being noticed, how to breathe quietly, how to exist as little as possible. Each day felt like a tightrope walk, balancing between visibility and the desire to be invisible. At night, lying on his mat, he came to a terrifying realization. If he died in that house, it would take days before anyone noticed. That thought settled heavily in his chest, a stone that weighed him down. It changed him, reshaping his understanding of life and survival. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He was a ghost in his own home, learning to navigate a world that had forgotten him. And hunger does some pretty wild things to a person's sense of right and wrong. It twists it, bends it, and makes you question everything you thought you knew about your own morals. 3 long days passed without a single bite to eat. By the 4th day, Odenigbo couldn't ignore the smell any longer. It was like a siren call, leading him straight to a neighbor's kitchen shed. There, a pot of rice sat on the stove, steam curling up into the air like an invitation. The aroma hit him like a wave, warm, rich, and absolutely real. His vision blurred, and he could feel his mouth watering. It was almost too much to bear. His hands shook as he thought. Just a spoon, just one little spoonful. He edged closer, heart racing with both hope and desperation. But then he froze. A voice echoed from behind the house. The neighbor was coming back. Odenigbo stepped back, his heart pounding like a drum, shame washing over him. He hadn't touched the pot, not yet. But when Mama Adana caught wind of what almost happened, the truth didn't matter. "So you've turned into a thief now?" she shouted, making sure everyone heard. "I didn't take anything," he murmured, barely above a whisper. She just laughed, a cold, harsh sound. "You didn't because you were caught too soon." The accusation spread like wildfire, faster than any truth ever could. Suddenly, people looked at him differently. Mothers pulled their kids close, and the plates that once found their way to him vanished. Even the little acts of kindness dried up. That night, hunger and shame curled up next to each other inside him, and something inside Odenigbo cracked, leaving him feeling more lost than ever. School was supposed to be a refuge. At least, that was how Odenigbo remembered it from before, when learning felt like a doorway to something brighter, when books smelled of possibility instead of dust and ridicule. Back then, school meant structure. It meant adults who spoke with authority but not cruelty. It meant a future he could imagine without fear. Mama Adana turned it into another weapon. She did not announce her decision to let him return to school. One morning, she simply tossed his torn uniform at him and said, "Wear that. You are going to school today." Hope flared briefly in his chest, small, fragile, almost painful. But it died quickly. She gave him no money for food, no money for books, no explanation to the teachers about his fees. "Education is not free," she said flatly. "Endure it." So he endured. Each morning, Odenigbo walked to school on an empty stomach, his legs already weak before the day began. His uniform, patched too many times to count, clung loosely to his shrinking body. The fabric smelled faintly of sweat and old soap, no matter how carefully he washed it. His sandals were torn, their soles flapping softly against the ground as he walked. The sound followed him like laughter. Other children noticed. They always did. "Orphan, son of nobody. Look at his clothes." At first, the words stung sharply. Later, they became background noise, another sound to endure, like hunger or pain. He learned to keep his eyes down, his steps measured, his presence as small as possible. In class, he sat at the back. Not because he wanted to, but because no one else wanted him beside them. Desks filled quickly, leaving him alone. The teacher rarely looked in his direction unless something went wrong. Hunger made learning difficult. Words blurred on the blackboard. Numbers swam. His head throbbed constantly, a dull ache behind his eyes. Sometimes, when the teacher spoke, the voice sounded distant, as though coming from underwater. Still, Odenigbo tried. He listened carefully. He memorized lessons because he could not always write them down. Exercise books were luxuries Mama Adana refused to buy. He borrowed pencils when he could. When he couldn't, he etched letters softly into the dirt with a stick, erasing them quickly before anyone noticed. Knowledge became something he chased quietly. Then came the day his body betrayed him. Morning assembly dragged on longer than usual. The sun climbed higher, burning down on rows of children standing stiffly in their uniforms. Odenigbo's stomach cramped violently. His vision blurred. Sweat poured down his face, cold and clammy. He tried to stay upright. He failed. The world tilted suddenly. Sounds stretched and distorted. Then everything went dark. When he came to, dust filled his mouth. Why did he fall like that? Someone asked. Lazy boy, another voice muttered. The teacher did not kneel beside him. She frowned. Stand up, she said sharply. Do you think this is your house? Odenigbo tried. His legs shook violently. Laughter rippled through the assembly. Shame burned hotter than the sun. When school ended that day, he walked home slowly, every step heavy. He hoped, foolishly, that Mama Adana might ask what happened. That night, she beat him, not with rage, but with purpose. Each strike measured, deliberate. Not enough to kill him. Enough to remind him. School became unbearable after that. Some days, she refused to let him attend at all. School is making you proud, she said once. Stay at home. Other days, she sent him late on purpose, ensuring punishment awaited him. Teachers began to see him as troublesome. His reputation formed without his consent, slowly, unfairly, permanently. He was the boy who fainted, the boy who never had books, the boy who caused problems. Yet still, Odenigbo held on to learning. In the quiet moments, when others played, he traced letters in the dirt. He memorized words overheard from older students. He listened when teachers explained lessons meant for others. Education became rebellion. Not loud, not visible, but fierce. One afternoon, as he walked home from school alone, stomach empty, back aching, Odenigbo realized something that terrified him with its clarity. School would not save him. Not while Mama Adana controlled his life. Not while hunger owned his body. If he wanted to live, truly live, he would have to find another way. That thought stayed with him. Quiet, dangerous, unshakable. The village did not decide to abandon Odenigbo all at once. It happened gradually, in small choices that felt harmless to those making them. A look held too long. A plate withdrawn quietly. A door closed a little faster than usual. No announcement was made. No meeting was held. Yet somehow, everyone understood. This boy was trouble. Women spoke in lowered voices at the stream, glancing in his direction before turning away. Men shook their heads when his name was mentioned, as if disappointed in something they had never tried to understand. That boy has too much suffering following him. Where there is smoke, there is fire. Mama Adana is not the problem. That child is stubborn. Odenigbo heard these things without being meant to. Words carried easily in Amuaka. They floated through the air and settled where they pleased. He pretended not to hear, but each sentence pressed into him like a quiet verdict. Before, there had been small mercies. A woman who slipped him leftover food when Mama Adana wasn't looking. A neighbor who sent him on errands and let him keep the change. An old man who allowed him to rest in the shade while carrying loads. Those mercies disappeared. Plates were cleared before he could approach. Mothers called their children inside when he passed. Even the dogs barked at him differently now, as if sensing permission. One afternoon, hunger drove him to the house of a woman who used to help him. He stood at the gate for a long time before knocking. She opened the door, saw him, and hesitated. "What do you want?" she asked, not unkindly, but not warmly either. His voice failed him. "I wanted to ask if there's work." She looked past him, then lowered her voice. "Go home, my child. You shouldn't be here. I can help. Go home," she repeated more firmly. "I don't want trouble." The door closed gently. That gentleness hurt more than anger. Odenigbo stood there for a moment, staring at the door, then turned away. His legs felt heavy. His chest felt hollow. That was the day he understood. Kindness had become dangerous. Mama Adana's cruelty had done more than starve him. It had trained the village to fear association with him. No one wanted to be accused of encouraging bad behavior. No one wanted to be blamed. Silence was safer. At the stream, women no longer called his name. At the market, traders ignored him. At church, he was made to sit at the back, as if misfortune could spread by proximity. Even the elders spoke of him now with resignation. He is cursed, one of them said beneath the mango tree. Some children are born carrying heavy destinies, another replied. We have tried, someone else concluded, though no one could say how. Odenigbo heard that last one clearly. We have tried. It felt like a lie wrapped in relief. That evening, he sat alone behind the house, knees drawn to his chest, watching the sun lower itself into the trees. The sky burned orange and red, beautiful in a way that felt mocking. Children laughed somewhere nearby. He did not turn his head. Something inside him was changing, not breaking, not hardening, but rearranging itself quietly. A realization settled into him with terrifying calm. No adult was coming to save him. Not the neighbors, not the teachers, not the elders, not even God, at least, not in the way he had prayed for. For the first time, Odenigbo stopped asking questions. He stopped hoping for rescue, stopped looking toward doors, stopped imagining someone stepping in at the last moment. Instead, he began to watch. He watched how people survived, how they avoided pain, how they chose safety over justice. He watched Mama Adana closely now, not with fear, but with study. He learned her moods, her habits, her blind spots. He learned when she was least likely to notice him, when it was safest to move, when silence was protection. Hunger sharpened his mind. Suffering taught him patience. That night, lying on his mat, staring into darkness, Odenigbo made a decision. Not aloud, not dramatically, but firmly. He would not beg again. He would not wait. If the village had turned its back on him, then he would stop facing it too. From that moment on, something dangerous and powerful began to grow inside him. Self-reliance born of abandonment. And though he did not yet know it, this was the same seed that would one day grow into his escape, and much later, into his wealth. The accusation came quietly. Mama Adana did not shout. She did not curse. She did not even raise her voice when she said it. That was how Odenigbo knew it was serious. You want to run away. The words were spoken in the early evening, when the sun had begun to sink and shadows stretched long across the compound. Mama Adana stood with her arms folded, watching him the way one watches an animal that has begun to behave unpredictably. Odenigbo froze. No, Mama, he said quickly, though his voice lacked conviction. Fear tightened his throat. He had learned that denial rarely helped, but silence often made things worse. Mama Adana smiled faintly. That is what they all say. He did not know who they were. He did not ask. I see how you move now, she continued calmly. Quiet. Watching. Thinking you are clever. He lowered his eyes. I'm not thinking anything, he whispered. Mama Adana stepped closer. You think I don't know? Mama Adana said. You think I didn't notice how you stopped begging? How you stopped crying? Her hand struck him suddenly, hard enough to knock him sideways. He stumbled, but did not fall. The slap echoed through the compound, sharp and final. This one is planning something, Mama Adana announced loudly, turning so others could hear. I will not raise a snake in my house. Neighbors slowed their steps. Children stopped playing. Eyes gathered. Odenigbo's heart pounded violently. Around them, the village watched. Some faces showed discomfort. Others showed resignation. Most showed nothing at all. No one intervened. She pointed toward the gate. Sleep outside tonight. Did you hear me? The gate closed behind him with a final clang. Night descended quickly. Clouds gathered overhead, thick and heavy. The first drops of rain fell slowly, almost gently, as if testing his resolve. Then the rain came properly, hard, cold, unforgiving. It soaked Odenigbo instantly. Mud formed beneath Odenigbo, clinging to his skin. He tried to stand, failed, and collapsed against the tree, shivering violently. Fever crept in. His teeth chattered uncontrollably. His thoughts blurred. Pain and cold fused into something overwhelming. For a moment, just a moment, he thought this might be how it ended. Not with noise, not with resistance, just quietly, beneath rain and indifference. Asterisk if I sleep, A voice inside him whispered, "I might not wake up." The thought did not frighten him. That frightened Odenigbo. Summoning the last of his strength, Odenigbo forced his eyes open and pressed his back harder against the tree. Rain streamed down his face, mixing with tears he did not remember shedding. That was when clarity came. Sharp, unmistakable. If he stayed in Mama Adana's house, he would die. Not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly, quietly, unnoticed. The realization settled into him with terrifying calm. Odenigbo did not feel anger toward Mama Adana anymore. Anger required energy. What he felt instead was resolve. Cold, steady, unyielding. I will not die here. The rain continued to fall, drenching the earth, washing away footprints, erasing signs of suffering. But inside Odenigbo, something solidified. That beating did not break him. It freed him. By the time dawn approached, Odenigbo's body was weak, but his decision was unshakable. He would leave. Soon, the fever came in waves. Odenigbo drifted in and out of awareness, his body burning one moment and shaking with cold the next. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn, but the chill it left behind clung to him stubbornly, settling deep into his bones. His clothes were stiff with dried mud and blood. Every movement sent sharp pain through his back and ribs. He did not remember crawling closer to the tree, but there he was, curled at its base, forehead pressed against rough bark, breath shallow and uneven. The sky lightened slowly. Gray crept into the darkness, soft and hesitant, as if morning itself was unsure whether to arrive. Birds began to stir, their sounds distant and unreal. Odenigbo felt disconnected from his body, as though he were floating somewhere just above it, watching a boy who looked like him struggle to breathe. He closed his eyes, and that was when he heard her, not as memory, not as imagination, but as presence. Odenigbo. The voice was gentle, familiar. It carried none of the sharpness Mama Adana's voice always held. It spoke his name the way it had been spoken long ago, carefully, lovingly, as though the sound itself mattered. His chest tightened. "Mama," he whispered, though his lips barely moved. In his fevered mind, the world shifted. The cold ground beneath him softened. The smell of wet earth faded, replaced by something warm and comforting. Palm oil, smoke, home. She stood before him, not as she had been at the end, frail and coughing, but as she was in his earliest memories. Strong, upright, her wrapper clean, her head held high, her eyes full of a quiet strength he had not understood as a child. "You have suffered," she said simply. Tears spilled freely now, hot against his cheeks. "I tried," he said, his voice breaking. "I tried to be good." She knelt in front of him and cupped his face in her hands. Her touch was warm, solid, real. "I know," she said. "You endured more than many adults ever will." He swallowed hard. "Why didn't anyone help me?" he asked. "Why did you leave me there?" Her expression did not harden. It softened. "Because I believed you would survive," she said. "And because staying would have killed both of us." The truth of that settled heavily in his chest. "I'm tired," he admitted. "I don't want to fight anymore." She brushed her thumb across his cheek, wiping away tears. "Rest," she said gently. "But do not die where you are unloved." The words struck him with force. Not shouted, not commanded, spoken as truth. "Your life is bigger than this place," she continued. "Bigger than Mama Adana's house. Bigger than hunger and shame." "I'm afraid," he confessed. She smiled sadly. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is walking forward while fear follows behind." He felt her hands on his shoulders, steadying him. "Promise me something," she said. "What?" he asked. "Promise me you will leave," she said. "Promise me you will live." His chest heaved as he nodded. "I promise." She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, just as she used to when he was small. "Then wake up," she whispered. His eyes snapped open. Morning had arrived fully now. The sun crept above the trees, light spilling across the compound. The tree beside him cast a long shadow. His body ached violently, but his mind was clear, sharper than it had been in years. The fever was still there. The pain was still there. But something else had joined them. Resolve. He pushed himself upright slowly, biting back a groan. His legs trembled beneath him, but they held. He stood, unsteady but alive. Mama Adana's house loomed behind the gate, silent, uninviting, unchanged. For the first time, Odenigbo looked at it without fear. Only finality. He knew now that staying was not endurance, it was surrender, and he had promised not to surrender. That night, though he did not yet know how or when, would be his last beneath her roof. The thought did not frighten him. It strengthened him. Odenigbo did not plan the escape the way people imagine escapes are planned. There were no maps, no secret savings, no dramatic final words, only readiness. For days after the beating, he moved carefully, conserving energy, pretending obedience. Mama Adana watched him closely at first, her eyes sharp with suspicion, but when she saw no resistance, no defiance, her attention drifted elsewhere. Cruelty, once satisfied, grows bored. That boredom saved him. Odenigbo studied the rhythm of the house the way a prisoner studies guards. He noted when Mama Adana slept deepest, when the compound was busiest, when the village itself seemed distracted. He learned that just before dawn, when night and morning briefly shared the world, people paid the least attention. He waited for that hour. He owned almost nothing. A torn shirt, a pair of worn trousers, a pair of sandals that barely held together. He folded them carefully anyway, as if care could give them dignity. He found an old nylon bag behind the house and wiped it clean. Inside, he placed the clothes, a small exercise book from school, and a pencil no longer sharp enough to write properly. That was all. No food, no money, no protection except resolve. On the chosen night, the village slept heavily. The moon hung low, thin and pale, offering little light. Crickets sang loudly, filling the air with sound that disguised movement. Odenigbo rose slowly from his mat. Every movement felt louder than it was. His heart pounded violently in his chest, threatening to betray him. He paused often, listening, waiting for any sound that suggested discovery. None came. He stepped outside and stood still for a long moment, breathing in the familiar smells of the compound: smoke, dust, damp earth. These scents had shaped his childhood. They had also nearly ended it. He did not look toward Mama Adana's room. Some goodbyes are unnecessary. At the gate, he hesitated, not from fear, but from the strange weight of finality. Once he stepped through, there would be no returning quietly, no pretending, no safety net, however cruel. He thought of his mother's voice. "Do not die where you are unloved." He lifted the latch. The gate opened without a sound. The road stretched before him, dark, empty, uncertain. He stepped onto it barefoot, sandals dangling from his hand to avoid noise, and began to walk. He did not run. Running drew attention. Instead, he walked steadily, each step deliberate, forcing calm into his limbs. Only when the village faded behind him, when the houses thinned and the path narrowed, did he allow himself to breathe deeply. His feet ached quickly. Stones bit into his soles. Thorns scratched his skin. He welcomed the pain. Pain meant he was awake. As the sky lightened, fear crept in, not of Mama Adana, but of the unknown ahead. He had no destination, only direction. Away. When the sun rose fully, he reached the outskirts of the nearest town. People moved about, busy with their own lives, unaware of the boy slipping among them, thin and wary. No one stopped him. No one noticed. Freedom, he realized, was not celebrated. It was ignored. By midday, hunger returned with ferocity. His stomach cramped violently, forcing him to sit beneath a mango tree. He closed his eyes briefly, fighting dizziness. He accepted it. That night, he slept under an abandoned stall in the market, curled tightly to preserve warmth. Strange sounds filled the darkness: rats, distant voices, footsteps passing too close. Fear sat with him, alert and sharp. But no one beat him. No one insulted him. No one ordered him to disappear. In the morning, he woke alive. And for the first time in his memory, no one owned him. The road ahead was cruel, uncertain, and unforgiving. But it was his. The city did not welcome Odenigbo. It did not chase him away either. It simply existed, vast, indifferent, unmoved by his hunger or his history. Buildings rose without curiosity. Roads stretched endlessly, carrying people who walked fast and looked through him rather than at him. In the village, cruelty had been personal. In the city, it was impersonal. And that difference confused him at first. He arrived with nothing but exhaustion and resolve, stepping into a world that moved too quickly for sympathy. Buses roared past, spraying dust and smoke. Traders shouted prices he could not afford. Music blared from shops, loud and joyful, mocking his empty stomach. No one asked where he came from. No one asked where he was going. The first day passed in a blur of walking. He followed crowds instinctively, drifting toward areas that smelled of food, then away when shop owners noticed him lingering too long. Hunger sharpened again, gnawing at his insides with new cruelty. The city did not allow weakness, it exposed it. By evening, his legs trembled violently. He found a spot behind a closed kiosk and sat down carefully, back against metal still warm from the sun. He watched as people closed shops, counted money, laughed, argued, went home. Night fell hard and fast. Darkness in the city was different from darkness in the village. It was louder, more dangerous. Sounds layered over each other, shouting, engines, footsteps, distant sirens. Sleep came in short, broken pieces. On the third day, hunger nearly defeated him. He watched a man eat roasted corn by the roadside, saliva pooling in his mouth, vision narrowing. Without thinking, Odenigbo stepped closer. "A bag," he whispered. "Please." The man glanced at him briefly, then turned away. The word "a bag" fell uselessly to the ground. Shame burned his throat. That night, desperation pushed him somewhere dangerous. He followed other boys his age, boys with sharp eyes and hollow cheeks, toward the back of a market where discarded food was dumped. He learned quickly how to move quietly, how to avoid guards, how to pick through refuse without cutting himself on broken glass. He ate food he could not identify. It tasted like survival. Weeks passed. He learned the rules of the street the hard way. Never sleep too deeply. Never trust too quickly. Never show fear. He watched boys disappear, arrested, beaten, swallowed by things no one spoke about openly. He learned which streets to avoid, which corners offered temporary safety, which adults helped and which harmed. Some nights, despair wrapped itself around him tightly. Once, curled beneath a bridge as rain poured down, he nearly gave up. His body shook violently, fever returning, exhaustion dragging him towards sleep he feared might be final. What if Mama Adana was right? The thought crept in. What if this was worse? But then he remembered something important. In the city, hunger did not come with insults. Pain did not come with humiliation. Suffering was brutal, but it was not personal. And that meant something. One afternoon, while sheltering from the sun near a row of small shops, Odenigbo noticed something he had not allowed himself to notice before. Words, signboards, posters, newspapers spread on tables. He leaned closer. The letters made sense. He could read. The realization startled him. It felt like discovering a hidden weapon. While other boys relied on strength or speed, he possessed something quieter and potentially more powerful. He began to linger near places where words gathered. Printing shops, bookstalls, offices with peeling notices on the walls. That was how he saw the old printer for the first time. Machines hummed softly around him. Paper smelled clean and important. Odenigbo stood outside the shop longer than he should have. The printer noticed. "What are you looking at?" the man asked, not unkindly. "Nothing, sir." Odenigbo replied quickly, stepping back. The man studied him for a moment. "You can read," he said, not as a question. Odenigbo hesitated, then nodded. That nod changed everything. The city still did not care. But one man had seen him. The old printer's name was Mr. Salami, a name that always made Odenigbo chuckle a little. It was a name that felt so ordinary, yet so memorable, right? He didn't introduce himself right away, though. Instead, he just stood there, watching Odenigbo with a keen eye, like a hawk surveying its surroundings. No questions about where Odenigbo came from or why a boy his age was hanging around a printing shop without a school bag or lunch. Instead, Mr. Salami let the boy's eyes wander over the posters that were plastered haphazardly on the wall. They were colorful and chaotic, words fighting for attention, and Odenigbo couldn't help but feel drawn to them. "You can read," Mr. Salami stated, more of a realization than a question. "Yes, sir," Odenigbo replied, his voice a mix of pride and shyness. With a single nod, Mr. Salami turned back to his work, and just like that, the conversation seemed to wrap up. But something had shifted, something electric in the air. Odenigbo found himself returning the next day, and the day after that. He wasn't begging for anything. He wasn't asking questions. He stood at a respectful distance, soaking in the magic of the printing machines, the whirring of gears, the shuffling of paper, and the way words transformed into tangible things that people paid for. It was mesmerizing, really. On the fourth day, Mr. Salami broke the silence. "You are hungry," he said flatly, almost like a statement of fact rather than a question. Odenigbo stiffened, a wave of shame washing over him. Yes, sir, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Without a moment's hesitation, Mr. Salami reached into a brown paper bag and handed him a piece of bread. Eat, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Then sweep the floor. No speeches, no pity, no charity, just work. Odenigbo took that bread, and oh man, it was like a little piece of heaven. He ate slowly, tears threatening to spill over as he forced himself to swallow carefully. It wasn't just about the flavor, it was about the feeling of having earned that bite. He swept the floor thoroughly, making sure not to miss a single corner. The next day, Mr. Salami handed him rice. The day after that, beans. Food came first, and work came before any questions. Weeks turned into a rhythm, and Odenigbo learned the ins and outs of the shop. He figured out how to clean machines without causing any damage, how to arrange paper so it wouldn't jam, and how to observe silently, absorbing information like a sponge. Mr. Salami was strict, no doubt about it. Mistakes were corrected on the spot, and laziness was not tolerated. But here's the kicker. There was no cruelty in his corrections. It was all about expectation. You can do better, he would say, and somehow, that felt heavier than any punishment could. At night, Odenigbo would crash on a mat behind the shop, the hum of the city fading into a comforting background noise. He was always tired, but he wasn't desperate anymore. Hunger loosened its grip on him slowly, almost reluctantly. And then something amazing happened. His mind started to awaken. Mr. Salami taught him about letters properly, spacing, alignment, kerning, though he never used those fancy terms at first. He showed Odenigbo how typefaces carried emotion, how bold letters commanded attention, and how spacing could make words breathe. This is not just printing, he said one evening, his eyes sparkling with passion. This is communication. Odenigbo soaked it all in, hanging on to every word. By the time he was allowed to operate the small machines under supervision, his hands no longer shook. His confidence grew quietly, but without arrogance. Months turned into years, and the boy Odenigbo transformed into a young man. He learned bookkeeping just by watching invoices. He picked up negotiation skills by listening to customers argue about prices. He learned patience by waiting while machines malfunctioned and tempers flared. One afternoon, Mr. Salami looked at him with a seriousness that made Odenigbo sit up straight. I am getting old, he said, and Odenigbo's heart raced. You will take more responsibility now. That was it. No ceremony. No grand announcement. Just a transfer of trust. Odenigbo worked harder than ever. He was the first one to arrive before dawn and the last to leave at night. He took no shortcuts. When customers complained, he listened intently. When mistakes happened, he owned them, never shying away from accountability. Word spread quietly around town. This place is reliable. The young man there understands work. When Mr. Salami fell ill for a while, Odenigbo ran the shop solo. And guess what? It survived. When the old man returned, looking thinner and weaker, he nodded once at Odenigbo. You are ready, he said, and those words felt like a badge of honor. Years later, after Mr. Salami passed away peacefully, Odenigbo found himself standing in front of the shop, now his own. He didn't inherit it. He built it up through savings, discipline, and sheer endurance. But he didn't stop there. Oh no, he expanded. From printing to publishing, from publishing to branding, and then from branding to big contracts, corporations, campaigns, government work. He hired others, paid fair wages, and demanded excellence. Money didn't trickle in. It came in waves. He built offices, bought land, and invested quietly, always keeping an eye on the future. And one day, sitting alone in a glass-walled office that overlooked the city that once ignored him, Odenigbo had a moment of pure realization. He was extremely rich. Not just comfortable, not merely secure. Rich. The kind of rich that could change destinies. The kind that made hunger a distant memory. But wealth didn't erase memory. It sharpened it. And that memory called him home. In that moment, Odenigbo knew he wasn't just a success story. He was a testament to hard work, perseverance, and the incredible journey from a hungry boy to a man who could create opportunities for others. And that realization? That was the sweetest victory of all. Wealth didn't just drop into Odenigbo's lap overnight. Nope, it flowed in like rivers do, slowly at first, trickling in from many little streams. And then, bam! One day, it became impossible to ignore. After he snagged that printing shop, Odenigbo rolled up his sleeves and dove into work harder than ever. Owning the place didn't make him lazy. If anything, it sharpened his focus. He spent his nights poring over contracts, teaching himself the ins and outs of legal jargon, just like he once learned the alphabet, patiently and relentlessly. Marketing? He didn't just read about it. He watched what caught people's eyes, what made them trust a brand, and what pushed them to whip out their wallets. He figured out something that a lot of folks miss. Printing wasn't the real business. Influence was. He started crafting campaign materials for politicians, logos for up-and-coming companies, and manuals for institutions. His work was crisp, precise, and totally reliable. Deadlines? They were sacred. Quality? Non-negotiable. And guess what? People started to notice. Contracts got bigger, payments got heftier, and suddenly, doors that were once closed swung wide open. Odenigbo reinvested every naira he earned. He upgraded his machines, brought in smarter folks to help him, and before long, he went from one shop to three, and then to an entire building. Sleep? He got very little of it. Meals? Modest at best. Living? Simple. Hunger had taught him the art of restraint, and he was all about that. Fast forward 10 years, and Odenigbo's company had exploded beyond just printing. It branched out into branding, media consulting, and large-scale publishing. Government agencies came knocking, and multinational companies were signing long-term contracts like they were going out of style. Money started flowing in, first steadily, then aggressively. He quietly bought land, built warehouses, invested in transportation, and even dipped his toes into real estate. Banks started calling him sir, and even men older than Mama Adana bowed slightly when they greeted him. But he wore his success lightly. No flashy cars, no public boasting, and definitely no reckless spending. His wealth was structural, not performative. One evening, while seated alone in his top-floor office overlooking the twinkling city lights, Odenigbo leaned back and let himself embrace the truth for the first time. He was extremely rich. Not rich in rumors or appearances, but rich in assets, cash flow, and power, the kind of wealth that could protect generations. Yet, despite all this success, the memory of hunger never left him. He funded scholarships quietly, paid school fees for kids he'd never even met, and built a foundation that fed people without a single camera in sight. Because he remembered, and remembering kept him human. Still, one thing remained unresolved. The village. Mama Adana. The house that almost killed him. Odenigbo returned without announcement. No convoy. No sirens. No banners. Just one black car, dust-covered by village roads, rolling quietly into Amuka one early morning. The village looked smaller than he remembered, narrower, slower, unchanged in ways that felt unsettling. Children stopped playing when they saw the car. Adults stared openly. Whispers followed him like shadows. That's Odenigbo. Is that really him? They say he's very rich. He stepped out of the car calmly, dressed simply, posture relaxed. His presence carried weight without effort. Years of authority followed him invisibly. Mama Adana sat outside her house, older now, smaller, wrapped in faded cloth. Time had bent her spine, but not erased her sharpness. When she looked up and saw him, recognition struck immediately. Her face drained of color. She did not stand. She could not. Odenigbo approached slowly. Mama Adana, he said respectfully. Her lips trembled. Odenigbo, she whispered. Silence stretched between them. Thick, heavy, unbearable. Memories flooded the space. Hunger, rain, Cain, shame. But Odenigbo did not speak of them. He knelt, not because he was weak, but because he was whole. I have come to greet you, he said simply. Tears slipped down Mama Adana's face, unrestrained now. I was wicked, she whispered. Odenigbo shook his head gently. I survived, he replied. That was all. He stood, handed her an envelope quietly, money enough to erase poverty for the rest of her life, and turned away. No accusations, no revenge, no lectures. His success was answer enough. As he walked back to the car, the village watched in stunned silence. Power had returned, not to punish, but to transcend. When the car drove away, Mama Adana remained seated, envelope trembling in her hands, finally understanding the weight of what she had done. And Odenigbo? He did not look back. Some victories are not loud. Some justice does not shout. Sometimes, the greatest triumph is living so fully that the past loses its power. And so the boy who was once starved, beaten, erased, became a man so wealthy, so grounded, so complete, that even suffering could not claim him anymore. Every story carries a question. Tonight's is simple. If no one was watching, who would you be? Like, share, and subscribe, and tell us your thoughts in the comments. This is Tales of the Hinterland, where the quiet stories speak the loudest.